Hello and welcome. You're watching Weekly Brief. I'm Shweta Kothari and with me are my colleagues Kartik Malhotra and Rakesh Khar. And today we are talking about what broke in the newsroom through the week, and it has to be Donald Trump challenging the world order, mainly globalization. It's a topic of conversation, not just in the newsroom. Gentlemen, it's everywhere. You know, when you teach globalization to young kids, three features of globalization that stand out is one, people-to-people exchange. Then there is financial investments across border, and finally trade. The big conversation around trade has been challenged by Donald Trump, not just in his first term, but more so now in the last couple of months since he was sworn in as the US president in January this year. And Kartik, since then it's all about how Trump is challenging globalization. Are we looking at a new world order emerging?
I think there is one already. And you said what broke in the newsroom this week. Remember what broke in the newsroom the week before and the month before and the month before. So starting 20th Jan, I think one thing which has been challenged globally is globalization. And guess who was the originator? Which country was the originator of globalization? Mm-hmm. It was the US of A, right? This is something which has been capturing our attention collectively ever since Jan 20th, Donald Trump's inauguration for the second time as president of the US. And whatever one understood of the world being interconnected, whatever one understood of supply chains being diverse and not being centralized in one particular country or one economy, I think all of that has been challenged, and it's become a world where everybody wants to protect their interests and their interests alone. Mm-hmm. Now, while one could argue, is globalization dead or is globalization dying? Mm-hmm. And is it going to be revived, let's say 3 years from now, once Donald Trump is not sitting in the Oval Office, is something that honestly we don't have answers to right now. But the point is that every country is out there to find its own national interest and pretty much leave no stone unturned to stitch up something which was otherwise a forgotten term called free trade agreements. Right. We want to go back to FTAs and look at the kind of FTAs that India has been trying to sign, some that India has signed already, UK being the first one that India went ahead and signed, and the India-EU FTA is around the corner. We cover this every day in our shows. Piyush Goyal traveling to New Zealand, to Australia, in Israel more recently, Prime Minister Modi himself on his global visits at a time when you need to make sure that with Donald Trump and Trump-induced sort of tariffs and barriers in this global trade, you don't end up being on the losing side. You want to be on the winning side yourself. And the only way perhaps to do that is to make sure that those countries, those economies that you consider friends, maybe not the best of friends, are still with you, protecting your interests as well as their own, because any of these exchanges are going to be a give and take.
Absolutely. It is a give and take, and that's what exactly India is doing. Many other countries are also doing that. Across Asia Pacific particularly, we're looking at regional comprehensive trade agreements now shaping up like never before. I mean, this is the fastest rate at which FTAs are being signed across the globe. So EU, North American countries, India, many countries in Asia are also trying to stitch up their own FTAs. Now, Trump, many would say, had his own domestic political considerations, and that was the reason why he came up with, the policies that he did. But he is, in a way, changing the global order. But many experts, Rakesh, are pointing out that this is a revival of globalization. It's globalization 2.0, where each country is for its own.
Absolutely. I think, Trump ceases to be moving out of the headlines. He's right there as the main story for the last 6, 7, 8 months. And I think he'll continue to dominate the news headlines for the right or the wrong reasons. Societal perspective, you see, chaos leads to creativity. So I think what Trump has done, one can academically debate whether it's good, ugly, bad, but it has obviously made each country sit up and think afresh. So in that sense, he's a challenger. And he's challenging established norms, he's challenging established institutions. And that's where, countries are looking at new frames, new prisms to realign. So I think India has set off the motion, the new 2 terms, which are defining India's perspective, purely from India's perspective. It walked out of RCEP, which, again, is a matter of debate, whether it's the right thing to do or not the right thing to do. But look at the 2 terms. We have moved to minilaterals from multilaterals. We are non-aligned to multi-aligned. So these 2 terms define India's, geoeconomic and geopolitical policy. And I think both terms are extremely relevant in the Trump arena and the Trump era. So then there is this FTAs, BTAs. India has set the template and the pace, as Kartik rightly pointed out, going to EU, then individual countries, then the Middle East, then GCC bloc. And we all know that, India's SEPA with UAE has set the template for SEPA between UAE and many other global countries. So as Trump destabilizes the world is stabilizing itself. What you rightly call, globalization 3.0, 2.0, whatever name we give. Let's remember that, countries will do what is in their best interest. And like in politics, in society, there are no permanent friends in politics. There are no permanent friends, there are no permanent foes. So we are talking about a G2 versus a G7 versus G77 or a G8 versus a P5. So all these terms have come to revisit themselves. So, the latest one is G2. China was a foe 3 months ago. It's a best friend today. Tomorrow it could be another foe. So I think everybody is looking at finding out what disturbs them in this new order and what gives them a leeway or a window of hope. India is right there, but I would say we need to really be a little more nimble-footed. The world is changing, interests are changing. There are no permanent interests in terms of, friendship or foes. So we need to be on top of it. I guess led by the Prime Minister and the MEA, and of course Piyush Goyal, who is braving a very, very uncertain US in the BTA. We are preparing for 2026 with a definite trajectory where India should score, at least in terms of stabilizing itself.
Yeah, and given that Piyush Goyal is found to be at airports more often than not and busy, going through those papers and those videos also coming out and open to ensure that Commerce Minister is busy. He's very busy, but also,
as Commerce Minister, he's behaving like a diplomatic minister because he has to change his piece and his speech every time. There is a signal from US, from EU, from UK, and then the Middle East.
This is as nimble-footed as it gets. But talking about FTAs particularly, when the world was relatively more global, the trade was about everything, cheap goods, expensive goods. But now we are focused. We are focused on energy security. We are focused on semiconductors. And India is clear on what sort of cooperation it wants from other countries.
You're right. So, I think you're right. One has to be very focused because you've got to know as a country what is the surplus that you have and what is the deficit that you have. And that deficit in critical areas where you need to secure your interests is absolutely critical. Now, let's talk about, let's say, the India-UK FTA, right? Honestly, nothing very critical as far as what India needs from them. I don't think India needs cheaper gin or cheaper whiskey, right? But that's something UK wants to sell to India. So sure, let's have it. I mean, who minds getting a bottle of, Johnny Walker or, or any of the other UK-based companies that sell alcohol in India to not be cheaper? So great. I mean, it's more than welcome. But I think we've got to understand that our interest right now lies in energy security. Now, look at the sanctions imposed on the two biggest Russian oil exporters, Rosneft and Lukoil. Now, that is something that would have technically harmed India. But I think the statement that came from Reliance was also very clear that Reliance has already fulfilled its contractual obligation. Right. So the procurement, the contractual procurement is over. And we aren't really getting any of those heavily discounted, cheap Russian crude anymore, right? So our oil price is going to rise, yeah, sure, but then they're going to rise for everybody, right? So if India's growth takes a beating on account of rising crude prices, everybody's growth is going to take a beating. So I think one needs to understand what is that critical gap that you cannot produce and you need somebody to come and fill for you. And that is where the first aspect of globalization that you mentioned, people to people, is something that India is really, really bullish on because India needs to create employment for its youth. And if you look at the India-EU FTA and all the other sort of bilaterals that we are trying to stitch up in the European Union and elsewhere as well, I think it's pretty clear that India wants to make sure that there is an opportunity for India's youth to find meaningful employment outside of the shores of the country if India is not able to generate those jobs on its own. So that is one part of the deal. I think the second part of the deal is a little more interesting because one needs to understand what are India's own competitive advantages or distinctive advantages. And there's a difference between the two. Competitive advantage is something that you do better than your opponent. Right. Distinctive advantage is something that only you're able to do and nobody else is able to do. India doesn't have too much of a competitive advantage in this new world order, if you can call it globalization 2.0 or not, because IT services as we knew it is getting redefined. So that was India's competitive advantage. There were other countries which were also offering these services. India was able to do a better job. India was able to scale it up. India was able to do it at a cheaper cost than other countries, and hence that became a competitive advantage for India. China, on the other hand, has got a distinctive advantage. And the distinctive advantage is that it controls pretty much the entire supply chain of everything that the world needs, whether it is magnets, rare earth minerals, whether it is lithium ion supply. China pretty much holds the levers for global trade. And that is why I think the point that you were trying to make, this multilateral, bilateral, mini-lateral, is all converging at a point where US has understood that even though Donald Trump is singularly responsible for technically murdering this era of globalization, he cannot do without China.
That's right.
But
That's right.
can he pull levers on India? I think he's been testing India. India is not giving in just as yet, but we really don't know finally what is that first tranche of India's bilateral with US going to look like.
Well, that is, of course, the conversation, not just this week. It's been a conversation, as my colleagues pointed out, for many, many weeks now, whether there will be a comprehensive trade partnership or FTA with the US, between India and the US. We don't know just as yet. Week after week, we continue to bring you all those details, but Donald Trump challenging the world order, challenging globalization, that, of course, continues to be a conversation in the newsroom for this week.